The real estate agent called me, confused and apologetic. "Mr. Alcott? I'm calling to confirm the listing for the lake house on Cedar Point. Your children signed the paperwork to put it on the market. But the deed I'm looking at is in your name only, and you're very much alive. I can't list a man's property without his say-so. So I have to ask, did you agree to sell your lake house?" I stood on the dock where I taught all my children to swim. My own kids had tried to sell the family lake house out from under me, and they had no idea what I had already written into my will. Welcome back to The Forgotten Parent. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do right by the ones who raised them. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to stay till the end. My name is Leonard Alcott. I am 74 years old. I split my time between a small house in town and the lake house my father built in 1958. I wear old fishing vests and canvas hats. I drive a truck that smells like tackle and pine. People see a sentimental old man who talks too much about a cabin by a lake. They are not wrong. That cabin is my whole heart. Let me tell you why, and let me tell you what my children tried to do to it. My father built the lake house with his own hands the year I was born. Cedar Point. A simple cabin on a quiet lake in northern Michigan. Every board my father cut. Every nail he drove. I spent every summer of my childhood there. I learned to swim off that dock. I caught my first fish off those rocks. When I married my Winnie, we honeymooned there. We brought our own babies there. 4 children, all of them, learned to swim where I learned. That lake is not a property. It is the beating heart of 4 generations of Alcotts. Let me tell you about my father. His name was Walter. He came home from the war quiet and haunted. He needed a place to heal, so he found this lake. He bought the land for almost nothing. Then he built. He was not a rich man. He was a mechanic. But he built that cabin like it was a cathedral. It took him 3 summers. He carved my initials into the doorframe the day I was born. They are still there. Every Alcott child since has had their initials carved beside mine. The doorframe is a family tree now. You can read 4 generations in that wood. My father told me something on that dock when I was a boy. "Leon," he said, "a man spends his life chasing money, but money is just paper. This," he swept his arm at the lake, "this is real. Land you love, water your children swim in, a place to come home to. Never trade the real thing for the paper thing. Fools do that. Don't be a fool." I was 8 years old. I did not fully understand him. I understand him now. I have spent my whole life keeping his promise. My own children, it turned out, forgot it entirely. When I was young, this cabin saved me more than once. When I lost my first job, I came here. When Winnie and I fought early in our marriage, we came here, and the lake taught us patience. When my father died, I spread his ashes here. When my mother followed, hers too. And when my Winnie left me 2 years ago, I brought her home to this water. The lake holds all of them now. My father, my mother, my wife. When I stand on that dock, I am not alone. I am surrounded. That is what my children wanted to sell. They wanted to sell the place where their whole family sleeps. Winnie and I raised our children mostly at the lake in the summers. Those were the golden years. Sunburned kids and screen doors slamming, fireflies and card games on the porch. Winnie's laugh carrying across the water. She passed 2 years ago, in the fall, and I scattered some of her ashes in that lake because she asked me to. So when I stand on that dock, I am standing with my father and my wife and every summer we ever had. You cannot put a price on that. But my children tried. I have 4 children. Gregory is the oldest, 51, a lawyer in Chicago. Then Denise, 48, who married money and spends it. Then Paul, 45, always chasing a business scheme. And my youngest, Ruthie, 42. Ruthie is different. Ruthie loves the lake the way I do. The other 3, somewhere along the way, stopped seeing the cabin as home. They started seeing it as an asset, a dusty old cabin sitting on valuable lakefront land. And valuable land, to them, meant money they could have. It started at Winnie's funeral, if you can believe that. Barely a week after we buried their mother, Gregory pulled me aside. "Dad, we should talk about the lake house. That land's worth a fortune now. Developers are buying up the whole shore. We could all do very well." I looked at my son, still in his funeral suit, already counting the money in his mother's grave. I told him the lake house was not for sale. Not now. Not ever. He smiled and said, "We'll see, Dad. Be practical. Be practical." About the place where his mother's ashes floated. Over the next 2 years, the pressure never stopped. Gregory sent me listings for the neighboring lots that had sold. Denise talked about how much easier my life would be without the burden of the cabin. Paul had a whole scheme about splitting the land into parcels. They ganged up on me at holidays. 3 against 1. "Dad, you're being emotional. Dad, it's just a cabin. Dad, think about your grandchildren's inheritance." They talked about me like I was a stubborn old obstacle standing between them and their money. The signs had always been there, if I am honest. Gregory measured everything in dollars, even as a boy. He sold his own brother's bicycle once and pocketed the money. Denise married for money and never looked back. Paul chased get-rich schemes his whole life and left a trail of debts. Somewhere along the way, the 3 of them decided that love was for the naive and money was the only real thing. Exactly what my father warned me against. They became the fools he told me never to be. And they thought I was the fool for loving a lake. It hurt most at the holidays. We would gather, and I would look for the children I raised, and I would see 3 strangers who saw me as a bank with a pulse. They would corner me by the fireplace. "Dad, be practical." They would exchange looks when I talked about the lake, little glances that said, "There he goes again, the sentimental old man." They discussed my decline quietly, hoping I could not hear. I heard everything. A man does not become deaf just because his children wish he would. I heard them appraise my heart and find it worthless. And I said nothing. I was waiting to see how far they would go. Only Ruthie stood with me. "Leave Dad alone," she would tell her siblings. "It's not about the money. It's home." They dismissed her too. "Easy for you to say, Ruthie, you're broke and sentimental." They saw her love for the lake as weakness. They saw my love for it as senility. To the 3 of them, anyone who valued a memory over $1 was simply a fool to be managed. And they had decided to manage me. Let me tell you about Ruthie. She has the least money of all my children. She teaches kindergarten. She drives an old car. She has never once asked me for a thing. But every summer, she comes to the lake and opens the cabin. She sweeps the porch. She fixes the dock. She teaches her nieces and nephews to swim off the same boards I learned on. She does the work of love, quietly, expecting nothing. The others saw her empty bank account and called her a failure. I saw her full heart and called her the richest of them all. Ruthie never campaigned for the lake. That is the thing. She never once said, "Dad, leave it to me." She would have been horrified at the thought. She only ever said, "Dad, don't sell it, it's home." She wanted it protected, not owned. She wanted it for everyone. That is exactly why she was the only one who could be trusted with it. The child who does not want the inheritance for herself is usually the only one who should have it. My father knew that too. Wisdom skips the greedy hand and finds the gentle one. There is a deep ache in watching your children reveal what they truly value. To realize the people you raised would trade their own history for a check. To hear them discuss selling the place where their mother's ashes rest as if it were a used car. So many of us pour our lives into giving our children a place to belong, only to watch them appraise it. I felt that ache every single holiday, 3 voices telling me my heart was an inconvenience. And still I held on. Because some things you do not sell. Not for any price. Then came the phone call from the real estate agent. And this is the part that truly broke something in me. My 3 older children had not just pressured me. They had gone behind my back. They had forged my signature on listing paperwork and tried to actually put the lake house on the market. They were so certain I would die soon, or that they could bully me into it, that they decided to just start the sale without me. They tried to sell my father's cabin, my wife's resting place, while I was still alive to watch. Something in my chest went very still and very cold. Not the hot anger of a moment. The deep, quiet cold of a decision settling into place forever. I had spent 2 years hoping they would remember who they were, hoping the love of that lake would win out over greed. It would not. They had shown me, again and again, exactly what they valued. And now, at last, I believed them. So I stopped hoping. And I started planning. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it. But it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you genuinely. Now let me tell you what an old man does when his children try to sell his heart out from under him. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, an old friend named Harold Beck, who had known Winnie and me for 40 years. I told him about the forged listing. He was quiet for a long moment. "Leon," he said, "forging your signature on a property document, that's a crime. We could involve the police." I thought about it, but these were still my children. I did not want to send them to prison. I wanted something else. I wanted them to finally understand what they had thrown away. So I told Harold no police. But I want to change some things. I want to change them today. Harold came up to the lake to help me sort it out. We sat on the porch where I now sit every summer. He laid out my options. He is a careful man. "Leon," he said, "you have every legal right to do whatever you want with your property. The question isn't what you can do, it's what you can live with." I thought about that for a long time. I watched the sun go down over the water my father found, and I knew what I could live with, and what I could not. You see, my will had always split everything 4 ways, equally. That is what a fair father does. But fairness, I had learned, is not the same as wisdom. 3 of my children had shown me they would sell every memory we had for cash. One of them, Ruthie, would protect it with her life. To leave that lake equally to all 4 would be to guarantee its destruction the day I died. The 3 would outvote Ruthie and sell it in a week. My father's cabin would be a row of condos by spring. I could not allow that. Love had to be protected from greed, even within my own family. Harold asked me if I was sure. "This will cause a war, Leon," he warned. "They'll be furious. It might cost you your relationship with 3 of your 4 children." I sat with that. It was a real price. But then I pictured the lake as a subdivision. I pictured strangers' boats where my father taught me to fish. I pictured Winnie's ashes under a marina. And I knew. Some things are worth a war. "Draw it up, Harold," I said. "The lake goes to Ruthie, in trust, forever. Let the chips fall." My father did not build a cathedral so his grandchildren could sell it for scrap. So I made a new plan. I placed the lake house into a trust. A trust with ironclad terms. The lake house would pass to Ruthie alone, the only child who loved it as home. And the trust specified that it could never be sold out of the family, and must always remain a family gathering place, open to any Alcott who came in peace. My other 3 children would still inherit their fair share of my other assets. My savings, my investments, the house in town, divided equally. They would not be cheated. But the lake, the heart, would go to the only one with a heart for it. I did not tell them what I had done. Not yet. Because I wanted them to reveal themselves completely first, with no idea the ground had already shifted beneath them. And I knew exactly when they would do it. Every year, on the anniversary of my father first opening the cabin, the whole family gathers at the lake for a weekend. It was coming up in 3 weeks. They would all be there. And I had a feeling my 3 older children had plans of their own for that weekend. So did I. I was right about their plans. Ruthie, my loyal girl, came to me quietly before the gathering. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking, "I overheard Gregory and Denise. They're going to confront you this weekend, all three of them together. They've got a buyer lined up. They're going to force you to agree to sell in front of everyone, so you can't say no. Dad, they're planning to gang up on you at the lake." I took my daughter's hand. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. "Let them come. I've been waiting for them to show everyone who they are. This weekend they will." The family gathered at Cedar Point on a golden Saturday in July. Children and grandchildren everywhere. The lake sparkled. The screen doors slammed just like they did 50 years ago. For a few hours, it was almost the old magic. And then, after dinner, on the big porch my father built, Gregory tapped his glass. "Family," he said, "we need to have a serious talk about the future of this property. It's time to be practical." And so it began. The ambush I had known was coming. Gregory laid it out like the lawyer he is. The land value, the developer's offer, the smart financial move. Denise talked about how the upkeep was too much for Dad. Paul talked about splitting the proceeds. They had clearly rehearsed. They spoke as if the decision were already made, as if they only needed my signature to formalize it. The grandchildren shifted uncomfortably. Ruthie's jaw was tight. And I sat in my father's old rocking chair and let my three oldest children lay out, in front of the whole family, their plan to sell our history for cash. When they finished, Gregory turned to me. "So, Dad, will you finally be reasonable? Will you agree to sell?" The whole porch went quiet. Every face turned to me. This was the moment they had engineered. Public pressure. No escape. They were certain I would crumble. I rocked slowly for a moment. Then I stood up. "Thank you all for being so honest about what you want," I said calmly. "Now let me be honest about what's going to happen. And I want the grandchildren to hear it too, because this is a lesson about what family really means." I told them the truth. 3 weeks ago, you forged my signature and tried to sell this house behind my back, while I was still alive. The place where your mother's ashes rest. Gasps went around the porch. The grandchildren stared at their parents. Gregory started to speak, but I raised my hand. "I'm not finished. Because of that, I've made a decision. This lake house is no longer part of the estate you'll divide. I've placed it in a trust. It passes to Ruthie alone. The one child who has never once, in 2 years of pressure, asked me to sell it. The one who loves it as home, not as a payday." The porch erupted. "You can't do that." Denise cried. "That's not fair. We're your children, too." I looked at her steadily. "You'll each still inherit an equal share of everything else I own. You are not cheated of a dime. But the lake, the heart of this family, goes to the only one who has a heart for it. You showed me you'd sell it the moment I was gone. I believe you. So I've made sure you can't." Gregory's face was white with fury. "This is insane. You're punishing us for being practical." "No, son," I said. "I'm protecting your mother's lake from people who would pave it. There's a difference. You just can't see it. That's exactly why it can't be yours." Then I said the thing I most needed them to hear. I pointed to the door frame, to the carved initials. 4 generations of them. "Your initials are in that wood," I said. "So are mine. So are your children's. Your grandfather carved mine the day I was born. This isn't lumber and lakefront. It's every summer we ever had. Your mother's ashes are in that water. And you tried to sell it with a forged signature while I stood breathing in front of you." My voice finally shook. I could forgive almost anything, but not that. Not selling your mother's grave for a developer's check. The grandchildren were crying now. One of them, Gregory's own daughter, stood up. "Dad," she said to Gregory, "is that true? You forged Grandpa's name? You tried to sell the lake?" Gregory could not answer his own child. And in that silence the whole porch understood everything. The three of them had not just tried to rob their father, they had shamed themselves in front of the next generation. The grandchildren had learned, in one evening, exactly which of the adults valued money over memory. That lesson would outlast us all. Now here is where I want you to understand the kind of man I am. My children's crime was greed. It was the forgery, and the cold-hearted scheming, and the disrespect of their mother's memory. It was ugly. But it was not violence, so I did not send them to prison, though Harold said I could. I did not disinherit them entirely, though I had every right. I simply took the one thing they would have destroyed and gave it to the one who would protect it. That was proportional. It fit the crime exactly. They lost the lake because they proved they would kill it. They kept everything else because they were still my children. The three of them left the lake that weekend in a fury. For a while they did not speak to me. They called me cruel. They called Ruthie a schemer, which was rich, coming from them. But a strange thing happened over the following months. The grandchildren had heard everything on that porch, and the grandchildren sided with me. They had seen their parents try to sell the place where they learned to swim. Some of the grown grandkids stopped speaking to their own parents about it. Greed had cost my three oldest children something they never counted on: the respect of their own children. Ruthie, meanwhile, did exactly what I knew she would. She did not gloat. She did not change. She simply kept the lake house open to everyone, exactly as the trust required. She invited her siblings back. "It's still your home, too," she told them. "It always will be. That's the whole point. Dad didn't give it to me to keep you out. He gave it to me to keep it standing." That is when I knew, beyond any doubt, that I had chosen right. Ruthie understood. The lake was never about ownership. It was about stewardship. She would hold it for everyone. The others would have sold it out from under everyone. I want to be honest about the nights before that weekend. I did not sleep well. What father wants to publicly shame three of his own children? What father wants to rewrite his will against them? I loved them. Even then. Even after everything. I kept looking for another way. I kept hoping one of them would call and say, "Dad, we're sorry. Keep the lake, we understand." None of them did. Instead, Gregory called to remind me of the developer's deadline. That call was my answer. They had made their choice. I only had to stop pretending they hadn't. There was a moment on that porch, right before I stood up, when I almost lost my nerve. I looked at their faces, the children I bathed and fed and taught to swim. My heart nearly failed me. Then I looked at Ruthie. And I looked at the doorframe with all our initials. And I looked at the water where Winnie sleeps. And my nerve came back. Love is not always gentle. Sometimes love has to stand up on a porch and say the hard, true thing out loud, so that the thing you love can survive you. Slowly, over a couple of years, some healing came. Paul was the first to come around. He showed up at the lake one summer, quiet and a little ashamed, and he stayed for a week, and he remembered how to fish off those rocks. Denise softened when her own daughter begged her to stop feuding. Even Gregory, the hardest of them, came to Winnie's memorial at the lake and stood on the dock a long time, and I saw something crack in him at last. Money had blinded them. But the lake, patient as it is, was still there to remind them who they used to be. Gregory said something to me on the dock that day I will never forget. "Dad," he said quietly, "I spent 2 years so angry that you didn't trust me with the lake, and then I realized. You were right not to. I would have sold it. I know that now. I'm ashamed, but I know it." It was the first honest thing he had said in years. I put my hand on his shoulder. "The lake forgives, son," I told him. "It's been here longer than all our mistakes. Come back to it. Just come back in peace." He comes back now. In peace. It only cost him the thing he wanted most to learn. He never should have wanted it. These days, I spend my summers at Cedar Point, in my father's cabin with whichever Alcotts come in peace. Ruthie runs it beautifully. The screen doors still slam. The grandchildren still learn to swim off that dock. Winnie's lake still sparkles at dusk. I sit on the porch in my father's rocking chair, and I feel 4 generations around me, and I know the cabin is safe now. It will outlive me. It will outlive my children. It will hold Alcott summers long after we are all just names on the water. I visit Winnie at the lake she loved. I sit on the dock and talk to the water. I told her what our older 3 tried to do, and I told her how I stopped it. I told her Ruthie has the lake now and keeps it open to all. I like to think Winnie smiled her warm smile. "You always did know which of them had my heart," she would have said. She was right. I did. It was never about being fair to all 4. It was about being wise about the one thing that could not be replaced. I still wear my old fishing vest. My truck still smells like tackle and pine. People still think I am just a sentimental old man who talks too much about a cabin by a lake. They are exactly right. And I have learned there is no shame in it. The sentimental old men are the ones who remember what matters. My children thought love of a place was weakness. They learned on that porch that it was the strongest thing in the family, strong enough to change a will, strong enough to save a lake, strong enough to outlast their greed. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being part of this family. And remember this: when you decide who to leave your legacy to, do not simply divide it by blood and call it fair. Watch who protects what you love and who would sell it. Give the things that cannot be replaced to the hands that will hold them gently. Fairness divides equally, but wisdom gives the heart to the one with a heart for it.